Well, we also have Anthony Team here. Anthony, thanks for your patience. And please feel free to introduce yourself, and you have the floor.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Council, and thanks for the turnout today, residents. And great to get to hear Mark go before and do a good job of summarising, I guess, how simple the issues that you have are to fix. I'll start by just giving you all a little bit of background on Geovert and what we do. I suppose to give you some context of what I perhaps will go on to say afterwards, more specifically with regards to the challenge that you guys have got with getting the community reconnected. Geovert has been around for 25 years and we work in the natural hazard mitigation space. So exactly the problem that you've got. We build resilience back into aged infrastructure, we build new infrastructure, and we do a lot in the disaster recovery space. Aged infrastructure corridors, maybe the Great Ocean Road, which had its 100th birthday in 2019. It was built originally by our diggers after World War I. Geovert spent 10 years there, gradually rebuilding the resilience in that 100-year-old asset. We do a vast amount of disaster recovery in transport corridors throughout Australia and around the world, New Zealand, US and Canada. We're currently working on Coranda Range. There's 60 kilometres of road there that's got multiple slips above and below after Cyclone Jasper. And it's an interesting one because that was fast-tracked through emergency works. If they'd done that with your road, you would have been using it again probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. We took care of 4,500 kilometres of road network on the Shoalhaven area recently. Again, similar stuff. It's with the age these roads were built, they were all built with the same method, and there was no flaws in the method. They followed the geomorphology of the landscape down, and they tried to cut it into bedrock. And so what you commonly find, the inside lane has a bit of a cut to push it in, and the outside lane is just side cast material from the inside lane, and that's more or less what you've got. There's no huge deep instabilities. There's a bit of bedrock on the inside lane. That's why Mark's saying the road can get open again really quickly, and he's exactly right. Probably one of the things that was lacked during the construction time and the construction periods with the roads was the engineered fill on the outside, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. And that's a challenge I can see here today. There's a whole lot of people making a whole lot of promises and lots of reports with ARL ratings, and you're all been asked to study geology and become geotechnical experts, but the short and sharp of it is that no one actually really knows what they're looking, and no one's actually built one of these before except me. And so that's the challenge you've got. And unless you've got someone in the room that's built these, you're never going to get to the answer quick. If you ask consultants to keep writing reports, they'll do that. That's their business model, and they will keep writing reports till they're blue in the face, and you can't blame them. That is just the structure of their business model. They're only doing what they've been asked. Design build. Let me just touch on that for a second, because we do a lot of that in the mining space. It doesn't mean that we will not be using a designer like GHD or WSP or someone that aligns with the values and can provide the support that we need. What it does mean is that we start with the answer, with what we know needs to get built, and the design gets done concurrently, much like Mark was talking about, getting the road open quickly and carrying out some of the design works concurrent to some of the temporary works and the make safe happening. Where there's a will, there's a way for these things, and the quickest way to happen is in the design build process. There is powers inside government and the Recovery Authority to go to a sole source on unique properties, and especially if timeframes are pressed, and I think that's very much the case here. Timeframes I shared with Andrew, and it got passed through to the government in July. Upper price limit guarantee. It's a unique situation that I couldn't see a solution to for us to try and get this road open for you guys, was to put an upper price limit guarantee in place. It was 203 million, which is a upper price limit guarantee, means if it goes to 300 million, we're picking up the extra 100 million. That's how confident that I am that we can build it for less than $203 million. It's signed by me. It's backed on company letterhead. It's the only concrete thing in the whole discussion that you guys have got. The consultants' reports are all helpful, but they're all technical. And the ARLs are prescribed as per the process, but they still have a degree of subjectivity to it. So this is the only actual concrete thing you've got to get the road open. Getting the road open would mean handing it to Geovert. What it means for the council is that we would take on not just the contract works insurance for any damage to works being built, but we would take on the actual natural hazard risk insurance for the asset during the build lifetime. So we take it off the council's hands completely. So if another disaster happens, our insurance would cover that. So we take that over. It means we got the opportunity to go through, and much as Mark said, we would, if you handed it to me on Monday, I would have the road open by Christmas for works. It really is a few holes to make sure the inside lane's on bedrock, and a little bit of scaling and a little bit of make safe. And we've got a lane open and there's some traffic management in place. I've had to sit through an hour and a half of listening to people talk about reports and another 3 months of this and another 3 months of that. It's just about brought me to tears for you guys. If you want a solution, you go to a contractor. If you want a design report and risk modelling that you can't do anything with, you go to the consultants, and it's a wheel that keeps on turning. And the challenge that you've got is, unless you strike by luck expertise inside a government, you've got no one informed enough to make the direction to get it moving in the right direction. One of the things when people get confused about this, with the rebuild of assets like this, the DRFA funding allows them to be geometrically rebuilt to what they were. They're not supposed to have betterment or improvements built into them, but by default, when you rebuild a 100-year-old road to modern engineering standards, it is going to have improvements in it. So you're going to get a more resilient road anyway. And then if there's additional that needs to be done, like a culvert size needs to be increased, or even in your case, you've got really 3 areas that have been affected, they're going to be built back more robustly. Maybe the culverts could be upsized, but probably just as good would be to put a small debris fence at the top of the culverts to stop shit washing in and blocking them up. It's kindergarten stuff, honestly. All these problems come from water and debris building up, and then the water builds up behind it. And I've been to see 100 of these, and it's always the same problem. It's rainwater, surface water, build up, blockages, stuff that's not cleared out. And
she's asking, would your unsolicited report now go to the steering committee and in effect, I guess, bypass council? I'm not sure the answer to that.
I could say something a bit controversial there. The steering committee is going to be like a driverless car if it doesn't have anyone on it that's built these solutions before, and you're going to be sitting here talking about it in another 3 months, another 6 months, and you're not going to have the road built inside of the next 3 years. Sorry.
We're getting that sense. Yeah.
I did put that in my letter to, with the offer, what the indicative timeframe is when you start to roll backwards and forwards through risk assessments and design feasibilities, and then the design's got to be done, and then the design's got to be tendered, and then there's an assessment got to be done, and then there's an award, and then there's a mobilisation. You'll blink, you'll be 12 months down the track, and no one have lifted a finger to build anything on the road. And we had this conversation in July, and you're heading towards February, March now, so it's almost like a premonition. I said 57 weeks when I sent the letter in July, and you're most of the way there now. Well, one of the ways that the government has to fast track this is to sole source. To ensure value, they can go into an open book model where the cost is, the contractor's costs are audited. It also allows them to look into, in that open book model, the possible alliance. And when we've been to the disaster reduction conferences around the world, disaster risk reduction, one of the things that gets shared of what works and what doesn't work is the rebuild phase. And we tend to, in New Zealand and Australia, go to central government organised, and central government will put in a framework, and then they'll bring in some larger contractors and some of the bigger consultancies, and they'll form an alliance. In countries like Japan, with earthquakes, they tend to push it to the local council. And somewhere between the two is the right answer, where you've got, because you want the local council on board for the alliance and the rebuild so that they're gaining the knowledge of the asset.
Anthony, has your proposal had any response from the council?
No.